Merry Christmas, and welcome to a very special Christmas episode of the Mars Robotics Speaker Series. I'm very sorry for being a little late. As you can imagine, this is a very busy time of year for me, and a certain elf, who shall remain nameless, Sprinkles, forgot to remind me that we were about to start. That's how you get on the naughty list, Sprinkles. Well, thank you for joining me tonight. I'm glad you could be here. Every year, I get so many letters from children all over the world asking me so many wonderful questions about me and about Christmas. Christmas is a magical time of year, and there's a lot of science involved in the magic of Christmas. So, if you'll indulge this jolly old elf, I, with the help of some of my friends from the Mars Robotics team, would like to answer some of your questions tonight. Let's see here. How about this one? Dear Santa, do you get sick from eating so many cookies? No, one can never get sick from eating too many cookies, and besides, I take some home with me. I leave them outside all year long. They stay nice and fresh. Dear Santa, how old are you? You know, I don't remember, so let's just go with timeless. How about this one here? Dear Santa, why do you live at the North Pole? Well, I like the cold. It's good for the reindeer and, well, you can get land for very cheap at the North Pole. Dear Santa, how does NORAD track you, and how long have they been doing it? Well, to answer that question, why don't we go to Major Hillier and Nathan to find out.
Thanks, Santa. This is Nathan with the Mars Robotics Association, and I'm here with Major Cameron Hillier of NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command. Major Hillier, thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks for having me.
All right. Major Hillier, Santa has been getting questions from kids about NORAD and what you do. Thank you for joining us to help answer them. To start, what is NORAD?
Well, NORAD is a binational military organization between Canada and the United States. It was formed in 1958, basically in response to the growing Soviet threat and at the height of the Cold War.
How does NORAD work?
NORAD, I guess maybe the best way to answer that question is going back to 1958 itself. As stated, NORAD was basically an agreement between Canada and the United States to address what was a growing nuclear Soviet threat, basically with the idea that the Soviets would basically approach North America through the Arctic. So, due to the limitations or the constraints of basically monitoring and detecting that type of threat, geography played a huge component on how to detect that. From the United States standpoint, essentially Canada presented a vast amount of geography to kind of basically extend its range of detection beyond its own borders. So from that, Canada and the United States entered into agreement where they would establish what was called the distant early warning line which was a series of radars along the top of Alaska and Canada. And so that would be the first detection of any Soviet bombers at that point would come across the top to drop gravity bombs.
How does NORAD track Santa?
Well, the distant early warning system was since upgraded in the mid-'80s to the North Warning System, which is what we have today. The North Warning System, which is again that series of radars along the top of Alaska and Canada, is used to detect Santa's first movements out of the Arctic, out of the North Pole, I should say. The radars themselves work by emitting a signal which is then rotated in a 360-degree axis. They pick up anything that signal bounces off of, so basically kind of like an echo that comes back. That is registered to the radar as a track of interest, And then from there, based on historical flight data, that we can basically cross-reference that radar signature with other information we have to make a pretty good assessment that that is actually Santa on his beginning his Yuletide flight. As he exits radar range, then we transition to our geosynchronous satellites. We're about 22,000 miles above the Earth, which also have infrared sensors on them. Day to day, these sensors measure or basically look at ballistic missile activity around the world, and then from there, NORAD assesses where there are potential threats to Canada and the United States. However, on December 24th, a much more jovial mission as far as tracking Santa's progress by leveraging the infrared signature that comes from Rudolph's nose. Then we then transfer to our information to track his data, track his progress as he transits through the Eastern Hemisphere.
So you track Santa. Do you guys track things other than Santa?
Well, we track a lot of things. Our day-to-day mission, what we do 24/7, 365, is essentially broken down to our three core missions. That is aerospace warning, aerospace control, and maritime warning. Now, in layman's terms, basically what that means is that we monitor, detect any potential air or maritime threats to Canada and the United States. And then our aerospace control mission is basically that we assign jet fighters to go up and investigate and protect or guard against potential threats to either nation.
How long have you been tracking Santa?
That's a unique story as well, actually. So going back to my original comment that NORAD was established in 1958, tracking Santa actually began in 1955 with NORAD's predecessor, Continental Airspace Defense Command. So back in 1955, as you can imagine, being at CONAD at the time, the vast concern was essentially looking at the potential Soviet threat and what potential avenues of approach they could take. What happened was a local ad here in Colorado Springs basically promoted a system or a program where children could call in and talk to Santa Claus to discuss their wish list. Well, which is all well and great. It's a great promotional program in my opinion. But the only challenge to it is that they didn't actually print the number for the program. The number they printed was actually to the CONAD Operations Center. So if you can imagine basically being on duty that night, if you're looking out for the Soviet threat and the potential threat of a nuclear war at that point, being inundated with children's phone calls calling in all night looking to talk to Santa Claus to discuss their wish list. Well, Colonel Harry Shoup, who was on duty that night, was pretty quick to put two and two together, and then essentially, answer the phone calls to say that CONAD at that point would continue to track Santa's progress and ensure that he would have a safe journey to their house. And then he instructed the rest of the crews to do the exact same thing. Years following, he picked that up to continue that, which was a part of the program that NORAD adopted when Canada and the U.S. agreed for a mutual defense relationship, and we've been carrying that on now for 65 years.
Do you guys still get phone calls about kids' wish lists?
Well, certainly not leading up to the 24th. On December 24th, we do provide our call center, which is 1-877 High NORAD, and folks of all ages can call into that. And essentially, what we do is provide those who call in the latest on Santa's progress, where he is, and give them an approximate time on when they can be expected for Santa to arrive at their house. In addition, we also provide an authoritative voice for any parents who call. Must be in bed for Santa to arrive.
How else can you track Santa as a person?
Yeah, there's a number of ways, and perhaps my favorite way, to be honest with you, is by going to our website, www.noradsanta.org. Once you log onto that website on December 24th, you'll be given a graphic that gives you basically a bird's eye view, if you will, of Santa's progress as he transits the globe on his Yuletide flight. Alternatively, you can even log in there today, and there's a bunch of other information that you can access as well, whether it's the origins of how NORAD started tracking Santa, how NORAD tracks Santa using its plethora of military assets that we use day to day on our regular missions, 365 days a year. Also, we have an arcade in there and a music forum. From the arcade itself, we have an advent calendar set up so that it releases one game every day, starting on the 1st to the 24th. So you can test your skill there. And again, speaking from personal experience, they're way more difficult than you think they are. A couple other ways that you can track Santa are basically through our social media accounts, Facebook and Twitter primarily, at NORAD Santa. In addition to that, GM owners can use the OnStar feature to track Santa. Just push a little blue button and ask where's Santa, and you can get the latest from the OnStar feature. In addition to that, if you have Amazon Alexa, just ask Alexa where's Santa, and even Alexa can give you the latest.
Do airplanes see Santa and his sleigh?
Well, our jet fighters certainly do. So going back to the transit from the radars and to the satellite and the infrared sensors, once Santa enters the Western Hemisphere, and he is there first greeted by our CF-18s from the Royal Canadian Air Force off the coast of Newfoundland. Now, Santa, as you can imagine, flies extremely fast, so he's nice enough to kind of slow down and greet our CF-18s on that initial flight. And he's escorted through Canadian airspace as he proceeds west, and then until finally they do a handoff into the US with our F-16s and F-15s. And again, proceeding west, chasing twilight as it were, finally handing off to our F-22s in Alaska.
As you mentioned, Santa's flying pretty fast. How do planes not crash into him?
Well, Santa's been doing this for many centuries, and of course, over the last century and a bit with the advent of aircraft, he's got a pretty good system down. NORAD's only been tracking him for the last 65 years, but with the advent of aerospace control and air traffic control, we provide tidbits and information as best we can. However, the jolly good man has been doing this for a long, long time, and we just try not to disturb what he's got down pat.
Thanks again for joining us today, Major Hillier, and for everything you've taught us about NORAD and how NORAD tracks Santa each year. I'm Nathan with the Mars Robotics Association, and I've been talking with Major Cameron Hillier of the North American Aerospace Defense Command. Back to you, Santa.
All right, great, thanks.
Well, thank you, Major Hillier and Nathan. Well, let's get on to some more questions. Yes. How about this one? Dear Santa, why do you wear red? Well, I thought either red or green would be appropriate, considering, and I tried green, but that seemed a bit gauche, and red is more slimming, so that's why I wear red. Well, how about this one? Dear Santa, what is your favorite type of Christmas tree? Well, I always get my Christmas tree from Scott and Patty at the Grateful Acres Christmas Tree Farm. And Lindsay and Evan are there right now.
Today we're here at Grateful Acres Tree Farm with Scott and Patty, and they're going to tell us a little bit about Christmas trees and how you can get one.
And we appreciate you coming out. I just, we've got we call it a hobby farm out here. It's a little side thing that we've done for, 15, 20 years now. 20 years,
yeah.
It's been 20 years already.
Yeah.
Wow. So it's been a challenge. It's been a lot of fun and
a lot of work.
Well, we appreciate you letting us come out here and interview you.
Yeah. Our first question, what is Santa's favorite type of Christmas tree?
Well, Santa Claus likes all Christmas trees that are decorated very nicely with pretty lights and ornaments, but the ones that he likes the best have cookies nearby for his enjoyment.
How long does it take a Christmas tree to grow?
Well, it really depends on the type of tree and the way it's planted. We're fairly informal out here. We don't use pesticides or insecticides. We put our seedlings in. Seedlings are usually about 2 years old when we put them in. They're about this big. And within, say, 6 to 8 years, they're ready to cut. This one right here should be about 6 years old. Just a little bit taller, 6-foot tree.
Yep.
And,
this one will probably be ready next year for somebody to cut.
There are ways to speed it up. If you did some work to the ground and put a lot of fertilizer in, but we really don't do that here. So we're in about a 6 to 8 year cycle.
How do you get fully grown Christmas trees each year?
We plant trees every year. We started planting in the year 2000. So it was about 7 or 8 years after that we started selling trees. As Scott mentioned, the trees are usually about 2 years old, maybe 3 years old when we plant them. And then it takes a couple years, 6, 8 years for them to grow. So every year we plant about 300 or 400 trees. And we have a couple thousand right now in the field.
Yeah, I think in the early years we started with maybe planting 1,000, and then we planted. We planted quite a few in the early years to get a good stock, and but it's we've had some years where you mentioned earlier we've had some diseases that have hurt some of our trees. So there's been some years better than other years, but we've always had enough trees for people to come out and.
How can you tell how old a tree is?
You can tell when you cut the tree. You can look at the stump and count the rings.
A tree goes dormant in the wintertime and it doesn't grow at all, but during the summer, during the growth period, you'll get about a 1/4 inch, maybe a 1/2 inch growth on the diameter of the trunk. At the end of every summer then, into the winter, it'll leave a ring and a mark.
What goes into growing a Christmas tree?
Well, in the springtime, usually at the end of March, beginning of April, we order trees, seedlings. We've always used a place in Indiana County, Pennsylvania, and they actually mail the seedlings to us. They come in a big box and they're packed with some, stuff around them to keep them warm. And then we put ribbons around all those so we can see. They see the grass is a little tall here, so put ribbons around them. And then Scott goes with a planting bar, digs a hole, and I put the tree in the hole, and then we kind of squeeze the dirt back around it, and then let it go. And Mother Nature, the sunshine, all that kind of thing. In the summertime into the fall is when you actually trim the trees to get this really nice shape that everybody likes for their Christmas trees. And then in December, you sell them.
There's a lot of work that goes into it. It's not it's relaxing work, but there is a lot of work.
How do they get to be cone shaped?
In the early days, and a lot of people still use just regular, and they'll just come up and we'll just trim around every tree. Because if we don't, you'll see some up there that didn't get trimmed and they just get really crazy. Some people use a blade, and it's like a big sword, and they go up and down with a blade. What I've been using for the last number of years is I purchased this, and this is specifically for trimming. Got a little engine, and it's got a disc here with a very sharp edge. So you just get it started, and then you just go up and down the tree like this. Go all the way around it. This in your safety glasses and everything on, and then you just go like this and go from one tree then over to the next. Because we've probably got, 3,000 or 4,000 trees, and it takes quite a bit of time to get around to all of them.
How far can a tree bend? Can it really pick up a star like in the Eaton Park commercial?
Well, I thought long and hard about this one, because that's one of my favorite commercials. I think that usually trees can't bend. You can see they're pretty strong. I mean, if you have a Christmas tree at home, you certainly don't want it to bend over.
Unless you're a little one will bend all the way
The smaller
down.
ones can
Look
bend
at
like that.
Oh, wow.
That's a little fir tree, by the way.
Yeah.
It bends all. But once they get big and sturdy,
Yeah. But I
you're
do
not going to have to
think
bend.
at Christmas time, so in the middle of the when just it's dark and just the stars are out, I think a tree could bend over and pick up a star to help it become the star at the top of the Christmas tree.
A little bit of Christmas magic there.
That's right. That's right.
Got to have some magic.
Are there any bugs or diseases that cause problems for Christmas tree farmers?
Oh yeah. They're not isolated to any one farm. When it happens to all the farms in the area. And recently, over the last 4 or 5 years, there's a mold. That's a fungus that gets in the tree, and it causes needles to die. It's called needle cast. The good news is that if you take a tree like this one or the one behind you over here, these are Norway spruce, which are fairly. But a lot of the Colorados, for example, starting to die at the bottom here, and then eventually those needles will fall off, and you have to take the tree down. And you see a whole bunch of them down there that I've had to stack up that we weren't able to sell. And you can see around some of the brown needles on a number of the trees, and that's caused from the mold as well. Patty mentioned a weevil. A weevil is like a worm that gets into the very top of a tree. Sometimes you'll see the top of the tree dying. And so you'll get those every now and then. And so we just come through and we'll cut those off, but then you have to restart. You have one lead. If it gets damaged, you got to restart another one. It's probably taking another couple of to get that tree ready to go.
And they bore into the wood of the tree.
Yeah.
That's what causes the tree to die on the top. It could look perfectly healthy at the bottom, but since they're boring into the top, it dies from the top.
You mentioned this top piece. You had a name for it. Would you mind explaining a little bit about like the different parts, if there are?
The main, as we call it, is the very main growth of the tree and what gets the highest. And it's what everybody likes to be able to put their star on, or a Christmas star on. So that would be the lead. And then we have, and that's usually the smallest part of the diameter of the tree. And obviously as you go down, the trunk gets larger, you have a larger diameter. And you have limbs, which they're different on all these. Sometimes they're more tender, sometimes they're stiffer. And then we actually call this the leaf, even though it looks like a needle. It's actually, formally, it's technically called a leaf. So you have your stem, your trunk, your leaf, and your leader.
If you had to guesstimate, how many different types of trees do you have here?
Well, we have Norway spruce, white spruce, Colorado blue, Scotch, white pine, fir. Yeah, our best tree's been similar to this one. This is a Norway spruce. And it just seems that, I don't know if it's the hillside or the topography or the way our ground is drained, but for whatever reason, this tree grows really well. It stays nice and healthy all the way into the trunk. It builds a nice shape. It gets nice and dense. So that seems to be our favorite tree that we grow out here, the Norway spruce.
Patty and Scott, thank you so much for letting us come here to Grateful Acres Tree Farm and letting us learn about Christmas trees. It's been really interesting. Back to you, Santa.
All righty. So, thank you, everyone. We're sure grateful for you. little bit of Santa pun there. Anyway, we'll be right back after these messages. Physics is fun! Welcome back. Thank you for all that great information. Let's see. Oh, how about this? Dear Santa, how does the sleigh know where to go? Well, we've outfitted the sleigh as well as the reindeer with the most recent and up-to-date GPS technology, so we'll never get lost. How about this one? Dear Santa, what do reindeer eat? Well, to answer that one, why don't we go to Scott and Evan at Apthorp Farms?
Thanks, Santa. This is Evan with the Mars Robotics Association, and I'm here with Scott Apthorp of Apthorp Farms. Mr. Apthorp, thanks for joining us.
You're welcome, Evan.
So, I see you have someone else there with you.
Yes, this is Jack Frost, newest member of our herd. It's hard to tell when Jack was actually born, because in a herd, they'll give birth and we won't know what's going to happen. He is 7 months old now.
When are reindeer usually born, and how fast do they grow?
That's good. When they hit the ground, they're about anywhere between 10 and 15 pounds, and within a week's time, they'll put on almost 2 to 3 pounds every day. Yes. We'd like it when they're born in the spring and while it's still cold, and preferably with snow on the ground. Doesn't always happen.
Mr. Apthorp, Santa has gotten some letters from kids asking about reindeer, and he was wondering if you could help us out. Would you be able to help us out?
I'd be happy to, Evan.
Thank you. So first, could you tell us a little bit about you? How did you get started raising reindeer, and how did you learn to take care of them?
Well, Evan, I'm an engineer by trade. It's computer technology, communication technology, electrical engineering. I kind of work on legacy locomotives. I'm in the sim lab doing simulation engineering. And the way we got started with reindeer is my wife always loved reindeer and wanted to get reindeer. And in about 2012, we actually got our first reindeer after 5 years of doing permitting and licensing and learning about reindeer. And even with all of that, we didn't know a thing until we actually started to care for it.
Are reindeer real?
Evan, reindeer is definitely real. The Indians call them caribou, meaning paws and ground. And as the Sami started to basically farm them and use them for their nomadic lifestyle, they became a little bit more domestic. The genetics is a little different now because of the deviation. But essentially, caribou are bigger and a little more aggressive, where reindeer are much more docile and a little bit smaller. Caribou can exceed in excess of 500 to 600 pounds, where reindeer usually range between 200 and 400 pounds.
So, why does Santa use reindeer?
Santa uses reindeer because they're such a great herd animal. They're great in cold weather climates. They're one of the ones that can actually travel the most out of any land animal on the planet. And they're very fast.
What makes reindeer so well suited for cold climates?
They're one of the most unique animals when it comes to cold weather. Having fur that's 3 inches thick, hollow, just like a polar bear. Their arterial structure and their venous structure is right next to one another. And they can literally control the thermal dynamics of each of their legs just by thinking about it. So if a limb's too cold, they can warm it up. If it's too hot, they can cool it down. Let's see, they have a ligament that makes the snapping noise after age 1 so that they can actually tell where everybody is in snowstorms. So they use a sonic resonance that they can actually pick out who's who without even seeing them, just by sound.
Thank you. So what do reindeer eat?
Reindeer in the nature eat lichen, and lichen is a fungus and a algae combined. It actually takes almost 7 years to grow in snow and ice, and it actually bioluminescence in ultraviolet light. And these guys actually see in ultraviolet light, so they can actually see their food. They can also have a great smell, so they can find it up to 7 feet deep and will dig it out.
That's an interesting fact. Do reindeer ever lose their antlers?
Yeah, the boys usually lose them in December, January, and the girls will lose them in March and April. And they do it every year, and then they'll grow back in about 3 to 6 months' time. And for the first 4 years, they'll double in size each year. And then once fall hits, they'll get this velvet, turns really rough and very itchy, and they'll rub it on everything until it turns to bone.
Do reindeer ever get sick?
Reindeer can get sick. That's why we have a great veterinary program that comes out and makes sure that these guys have all the veterinary care they need so they don't get sick.
All right. What's been the best thing about raising reindeer?
Bringing reindeer to people and seeing their reaction. Even this communication that we're doing right now. What great thing to work.
How much horsepower does a reindeer have?
Well, that's quite an argument about horsepower. In the wild, they can pull up to 4 times their body weight, so they're great pullers. The Sami people use them exclusively to migrate around, carrying everything and anything that they might need in a nomadic way. If you do all the calculations with physics, their horsepower is incredible if you consider the fact they got to carry all the gifts in one night across the globe.
Do you happen to know how reindeer fly?
I'm not exactly sure because it's such a tightly guarded secret, but Santa has us run through all sorts of reindeer games in preparation for them to fly. They love to pull, they love to spin, they love to run, and they especially love the snow. They dance and skip, and it almost looks like they're flying just on the ground.
And our last question is, do you know how Rudolph's nose glows?
Santa has never really given up the secret, and Rudy never tells us, or Rudolph, sorry, never tells us a thing. But many animals bioluminesce, which you may have read of, and I think Rudy has that trait.
Mr. Apthorp, thanks again for joining us today and for everything you've taught us about reindeer. I'm Evan with the Mars Robotics Association, and I've been talking with Mr. Scott Apthorp of Apthorp Farms. Back to you, Santa.
Okay, I recognize that you're a sloth, but if you could just pick it up a little bit here. Santa's on a pretty schedule. Yes, well, thank you, Scott and Evan, very much, thank you. Well, what about another letter? Let's see. How about this one? Dear Santa, is the sleigh cold or warm? Well, with high altitudes, it gets pretty cold up there, so we've had to install some heated seats, as well as the heat distribution from the rockets on the sleigh help to keep things nice and toasty. Dear Santa, do the elves ever play tricks on you? Yes. Most of the time it's in good taste. Sometimes it's just weird. Occasionally you'll get that odd one there, like sprinkles. And sometimes it hurts. For instance, there was one time when I was hit with a water balloon. You do know that water freezes in the North Pole, don't you? It's like getting hit with a brick. Dear Santa, how many elves do you have? Well, let's see. 1, 2, carry the 7. You know what? Let's just say all of them. Dear Santa, how do all the elves make so many toys? Well, we utilize science, technology, engineering, art, and math to aid in our toy-making needs. We'll be back after this. Oh my, look how late it's gotten. I really have to get back to getting ready for Christmas Eve. So, I'm afraid there's only time for one more question. Dear Santa, what is the best piece of advice you've ever received? That's easy. The very best gifts are the ones we give, not the ones we get. I want to thank all of you again for joining me. And thank you all for the wonderful letters and the wonderful questions. I hope I and my friends from the Mars Robotics Association were able to help you learn more about the magical science of Christmas. The Mars Robotics Speaker Series is a production of the students of the Mars Robotics Association. Mars Robotics is part of FIRST Robotics, with teams competing in FIRST LEGO League and FIRST Technical Challenge. For more information about the Mars Robotics Association or the Mars Robotics Speaker Series or any of our programs, please visit us online at www.marsroboticsassociation.org. Good night, everyone, and Merry Christmas! Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night.